Did you think I would thank you? Her voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes dangerous men nervous. He stood in front of her, tailored suit, calm expression, hands that had just destroyed 3 lives with a single phone call. He'd expected something. Gratitude, maybe. Softness. Relief. What he got was a woman looking at him like she could see straight through to his bones. They're finished, he said. Everything they built. Gone. They'll never touch you again. She didn't blink. You watched them break me. 5 words. That's all it took. 5 words to crack the foundation of a man who'd never been told no. I protected you, he said, and for the first time, there was something sharp in his voice. Something almost like confusion. She smiled. It wasn't kind. You protected me after, she said. Where were you during? Silence. The kind of silence that feels like falling. He'd ruined empires for her. Burned bridges. Called in favors. Unleashed consequences that would echo for years. And she was looking at him like none of it mattered. Like none of it was enough. Because it wasn't. You think power is the same as courage, she said softly. You think revenge is the same as defense. You think I should be grateful that you destroyed them in private, after you let them destroy me in public. She took a step back. Not in fear. In choice. I'm not yours to save, she said. And he realized, too late, that some women can't be bought. Some women can't be claimed. And some women will walk away from a man who owns the world. Because owning the world means nothing. If you don't have the courage to stand up in the moment that matters. This is not a love story. This is the story of the woman who walked away. Welcome to Afro Korean Tales and Stories. The home of Afro Korean love stories where passion crosses cultures and hearts learn new languages. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to powerful, emotional stories between Black women and Korean men. Filled with romance, tension, longing, and moments that stay with you long after the story ends. And to our returning family, welcome back. Your love, comments, and support keep these stories alive. Before the story continues, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Now tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? And what part of this story is already pulling at your heart? Let's connect. Let's feel the story together. 6 hours earlier. The evening had started like any other. Imani arrived at Moonlit Pearl at exactly 5:47 p.m., 13 minutes early, the way her mother had taught her. Early meant prepared. Early meant professional. Early meant they could never say you weren't ready. She tied her hair back into a sleek bun, smoothed down her black uniform, and checked her reflection in the staff bathroom mirror. You've got this, she whispered to herself. She did this every shift. A small ritual. A reminder. Because working at Moonlit Pearl required armor. Not the kind you could see, but the kind you built inside yourself. The kind that helped you smile at people who looked through you. The kind that helped you stay calm when someone treated you like you were invisible. Or worse, when someone treated you like you were too visible. The dining room was already filling up. Los Angeles elite dressed in clothes that cost more than her car. Tech executives. Entertainment lawyers. Old money wrapped in new designer labels. And tonight, Table 7. Imani noticed them immediately. 3 men and 2 women, all Korean, all expensively dressed. They had that particular kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Never being denied anything. Never facing consequences. The hostess, a girl named Sophie who'd been kind to Imani since day one, caught her eye and mouthed, "Good luck." Imani's stomach tightened. She approached the table with her notepad ready and her customer service smile firmly in place. "Good evening," she said in flawless Korean, her accent clean and precise. "Welcome to Moonlit Pearl. My name is Imani, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The man in the charcoal suit looked up slowly. His eyes traveled over her face, her uniform, her hands, taking inventory in a way that made her skin crawl. "You speak Korean?" he asked in English, his tone surprised. "Suspicious." "Yes, sir," Imani replied, still in Korean. I'm fluent. May I start you off with some drinks, or would you like a moment to look at the menu? The woman beside him, draped in Chanel and cruelty, laughed softly. How interesting, she said, also in English. She turned to her companions. Did you hear that? She's fluent. The way she said it, like it was a party trick. Like Imani had performed a magic show. Imani's smile didn't waver. She'd been here before. Different tables. Same energy. I'll give you a few minutes, she said pleasantly, and turned to leave. Wait. The man's voice stopped her. She turned back, her expression neutral. Yes, sir. I want the galbi Jim, he said slowly, enunciating each syllable like she might not understand. Do you know what that is? Imani's jaw tightened. Yes, sir. The braised short ribs. Excellent choice. And for the rest of the table. They ordered. She wrote everything down, repeated it back perfectly, in Korean, and headed to the kitchen. She could feel their eyes on her back. She could hear their whispers. An hour later, she returned with their food. That's when everything fell apart. This isn't what I ordered, the man said immediately, not even looking at his plate. Imani blinked. I'm sorry, sir, but this is the galbi Jim. You ordered. I ordered bulgogi, he interrupted, his voice loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. Are you telling me I don't know what I ordered? Her heart sank. She knew he'd ordered the galbi Jim. She'd repeated it back to him. Twice. But she also knew what was happening. This wasn't about the food. I apologize for the confusion, she said carefully. I can have the kitchen prepare. Confusion. The woman in Chanel laughed. Sweetheart, Korean is hard. It's okay if you got mixed up. Imani's pulse hammered in her ears. I didn't get mixed up, she said, her voice still professional but firmer now. You ordered the galbi Jim. I have it written down. Are you arguing with me? The man cut in, his eyes narrowing. Are you seriously standing here, arguing with a guest? The dining room was quieter now. People were watching. Imani felt the weight of every gaze, every judgment, every assumption being made about her in real time. I'm not arguing, sir. I'm simply... You know what I think, the man said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. I think you're in over your head here. This isn't exactly your kind of place, is it? The words landed like a physical blow. Your kind of place. Imani's breath caught. The woman beside him touched his arm, giggling. Oh, don't be mean. She's trying her best. It's just, she looked at Imani with mock sympathy. Maybe stick to simpler orders, honey. No shame in that. Laughter rippled around the table. And Imani, proud, educated, fluent in 3 languages Imani, felt herself shrinking. Felt the walls closing in. Felt the room spinning. And then, instinctively, desperately, she looked across the dining room. To him. Junho Park stood near the entrance to the private area, partially in shadow. His hands were clasped in front of him. His expression was carved from stone. He was watching table 7. He was watching her. Their eyes met. And for one brief, foolish moment, Imani thought he might step in. Might say something. Might. He looked away. Just turned his head slightly, as if the whole scene was beneath his notice. As if she was beneath his notice. The man at table 7 snapped his fingers in front of her face. Hello. Are you going to fix this or not? Imani flinched. Then she straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and said with a voice that didn't shake. I'll have the kitchen prepare your bulgogi immediately. She walked away with her head high. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She didn't let them see her break. But inside, deep inside where no one could see, something fundamental had shifted. Because Junho Park had watched them humiliate her. And he had done nothing. What Imani didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in 6 hours, those 3 men would wake up to find their entire lives destroyed. And the man who destroyed them would expect her to be grateful. Imani didn't sleep that night. She tried. She went through all the motions. shower, pajamas, chamomile tea her sister had left in the cupboard. She climbed into bed at 1:47 a.m. and stared at the ceiling until the numbers on her alarm clock blurred together. But every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that dining room. Back at table 7. Back in the moment when she'd looked at Jun-ho Park and silently begged him to say something. Anything. And he just stood there. That's what kept her awake. Not the insults. Not the laughter. Not even the humiliation of having her intelligence questioned in front of a room full of strangers. It was his silence that played on repeat in her mind. His silence that felt like abandonment. His silence that felt like agreement. At 3:15 a.m., her phone buzzed. "Danielle, you up?" Imani stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Imani, yeah." 3 dots appeared immediately. And, "Danielle, bad shift?" Imani's fingers hovered over the keyboard. How did she even begin to explain what had happened? How did she put into words the specific kind of humiliation that came from being reduced to a stereotype? From being made to feel small in a place where she'd worked so hard to belong? "Imani, I'll tell you tomorrow." "Danielle, want me to come over?" "Imani, no. I'm okay. Just tired." "Danielle, liar." Imani almost smiled. Almost. Her sister knew her too well. "Danielle, love you. Get some sleep." "Imani, love you too." But sleep didn't come. Instead, Imani lay in the dark and replayed every second of that interaction. The way the man in the charcoal suit had looked at her, like she was beneath him, like she was an inconvenience, like she didn't belong in a place that served people like him. The way the woman had called her sweetheart, with that particular tone of condescension that made the words sound like an insult. The way they'd laughed. God, the way they'd laughed. But worse than all of that, worse than anything they'd said or done, was the image of Jun-ho Park standing in the shadows. Watching. Not intervening. Not defending her. Not even flinching. Imani had worked at Moonlit Pearl for 8 months. In that time, she'd learned a few things about her employer. Jun-ho Park was quiet. Controlled. He moved through the restaurant like a shadow, present but never intrusive. He rarely spoke to the staff directly, but everyone knew when he was watching. And everyone knew what he was capable of. There were rumors, of course. Whispers in the break room about his family. About the kind of power they wielded. About the kind of business that required men in dark suits to show up at odd hours for meetings in the private dining room. Imani had never paid much attention to the rumors. She'd needed the job. The pay was good, better than anywhere else she'd applied. And she'd told herself that whatever Jun-ho Park did outside the restaurant wasn't her concern. But tonight, she'd needed him to be more than a silent observer. She'd needed him to be something. Someone. And he hadn't been. At 4:30 a.m., Imani gave up on sleep entirely. She made coffee, strong and black, and sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop open. She started updating her resume. Across the city, in an office that overlooked the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles, Jun-ho Park made his first phone call. "Min-jun," he said quietly. "I need information." On the other end of the line, his head of security didn't ask questions. He never did. "What kind of information?" Min-jun asked. "Table 7. Tonight's reservation. 3 men, 2 women. I want everything." A pause. "Everything," Min-jun repeated carefully. "Bank accounts, business holdings, partnerships, debts, scandals, anything that can be used." Another pause, longer this time. "Sir, may I ask what this is regarding?" Jun-ho's jaw tightened. He could still see her face. The way Imani had looked at him across the dining room. Not with anger. Not with fear. With something worse. Disappointment. "They disrespected one of my employees," Jun-ho said evenly. "I won't tolerate it." That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that he'd watched those people humiliate her, and something inside him had gone cold and sharp and dangerous. The whole truth was that he'd stood there calculating, weighing the cost of public intervention against the satisfaction of private destruction. The whole truth was that he'd chosen wrong. And now he was going to correct it. "I'll have the information within the hour," Min-jun said. "Good." Junho ended the call and set his phone down on the polished surface of his desk. The office was silent, dark except for the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd built this. All of it. The restaurant. The reputation. The network of favors and debts that stretched across 3 states. He'd learned from his father that power wasn't about violence, it was about leverage. About knowing exactly which pressure points to push. About being 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. And he'd learned from his mother that sometimes the quietest response was the most devastating. So he'd stayed quiet tonight. He'd watched. He'd waited. Because intervening in the moment would have been messy, emotional. It would have drawn attention, created questions. It was smarter to handle things properly. Discreetly. Wasn't it? Junho's phone buzzed. A message from Min-jun. Initial report attached. More to follow. Junho opened the file. The man in the charcoal suit was named David Choi, CEO of a mid-sized tech startup that was bleeding venture capital and drowning in debt. He had 3 business partners, 2 ex-wives, and a gambling problem he thought was secret. It wasn't. The woman in Chanel was Christine Yang, a socialite living off her family's real estate empire. An empire that was currently underwater on several properties and 1 lawsuit away from collapse. The others were similar. Successful on the surface. Fragile underneath. 1 push, and they'd all fall. Junho felt nothing as he read through their vulnerabilities. No satisfaction. No anger. Just cold calculation. By morning, he would make the necessary calls. By morning, their carefully constructed lives would begin to crumble. And Imani would be safe. That's what mattered, wasn't it? He was protecting her. He was correcting the injustice. He was doing what needed to be done. Junho closed the file and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the city glittered like broken glass. He didn't think about how Imani had looked at him tonight. He didn't think about the moment their eyes had met across the dining room. He didn't think about the way she'd straightened her spine and walked away with her head high, even though he could see the tremor in her hands. He didn't think about any of it. Because if he did, he might have to admit something he wasn't ready to face. That power without presence is just cowardice in expensive clothing. That silence can be louder than any insult. That sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone is nothing at all. At 6 a.m., Junho made his second call. "It's time," he said simply. And across the city, 3 people's lives began to unravel. They would wake up to frozen accounts, to canceled contracts, to partners who suddenly wouldn't return their calls. By noon, they would understand what it meant to cross Junho Park. But what Junho didn't understand yet, what he couldn't possibly know, was that destroying them wouldn't heal the wound he'd created. Because the woman he was trying to protect didn't need revenge. She'd needed him to stand beside her in the moment that mattered. And that moment was already gone. David Choi's phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m. He ignored the first call. And the second. By the third, his wife shook him awake with a hand that trembled slightly. "David," she whispered. "Something's wrong." He reached for his phone with eyes still half closed, expecting some minor crisis. A delayed shipment. A missed meeting. The kind of problem that money could solve. What he got was his CFO's voice, high-pitched and panicked. "The accounts are frozen. All of them. The investors pulled out overnight." "David, what the hell did you do?" David sat up so fast his vision blurred. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that we have 0 operating capital as of 6 a.m. this morning. I'm talking about Jenkins, Morrison, and Lee all terminating their partnerships effective immediately. I'm talking about..." David hung up. His hands were shaking now. This didn't make sense. Nothing had changed. There was no scandal, no missed payment, no reason for anyone to. His phone rang again. A different number this time. "Mr. Choi, This is Robert Chen from Sterling Investments. I'm calling to inform you that we're withdrawing our funding, effective immediately. Our legal team will be in touch regarding breach of contract. Breach of? What breach? We haven't breached anything. That's not what our information suggests. We've received documentation indicating financial irregularities that... What documentation? From who? Silence. Then, I'm not at liberty to say, but I'd suggest you retain legal counsel. Quickly. The line went dead. David stared at his phone like it was a grenade. And across the city, in a penthouse apartment in Beverly Hills, Christine Yang was having a very similar morning. Except hers started with a lawsuit. Hand-delivered at 7:15 a.m. by a man in a suit who looked apologetic but determined. Ma'am, you've been served. Christine took the envelope with manicured fingers and a confused smile. Served? There must be some mistake. I'm not. She opened it. Her smile died. The lawsuit was from the family that had purchased one of her properties 6 months ago. They were claiming fraud, misrepresentation, deliberate concealment of structural damage. The amount they were suing for would bankrupt her. This is insane, she breathed. We disclosed everything. Everything was legal. This is... Her phone buzzed. A text from her lawyer. We need to talk. Now. 3 more families filed similar suits this morning. Someone's targeting you. Christine's legs went weak. She sat down on her marble entryway floor, designer pajamas and all, and tried to breathe. By 9 a.m., all 3 people from Table 7 were experiencing the same phenomenon. Accounts frozen. Partners vanishing. Contracts dissolved. Reputations crumbling. It was surgical. Precise. Devastating. And none of them understood why. Jun-ho received the updates throughout the morning. He sat in his office at Moonlit Pearl, a cup of tea cooling on his desk, and read each report with the same calm expression he wore when reviewing the dinner menu. David Choi. Company on the verge of collapse. Wife threatening divorce. 3 investors pulling out, citing concerns about leadership and financial stability. Christine Yang. Facing multiple lawsuits that would drain her family's accounts. Her mother had already called twice, screaming about disgrace and consequences. The others. Similar stories. Different details. Same result. Ruin. Jun-ho felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not regret. Not even the cold pleasure that usually came with a well-executed plan. He'd done what needed to be done. They'd humiliated one of his employees in his establishment. They'd mocked her intelligence, questioned her worth, treated her like she was beneath them. They'd disrespected what was his to protect. And now they were paying for it. Simple. Clean. Just, sir. Jun-ho looked up. Min-jun stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. The final report, he said, placing a folder on the desk. Everything you requested. It's done. Jun-ho nodded. Thank you. Min-jun didn't leave. After a moment, Jun-ho raised an eyebrow. Was there something else? Permission to speak freely, sir? Always. Min-jun hesitated. He'd worked for the Park family for 15 years. He'd seen Jun-ho grow from a quiet, watchful teenager into the man who now controlled half the city's underground economy. He'd learned when to speak and when to stay silent. This felt like a moment that required words. May I ask? Why her? Jun-ho's expression didn't change. I don't know what you mean. Yes, sir. You do. Silence stretched between them. Employees get disrespected sometimes, Min-jun continued carefully. It's unfortunate, but it happens. You've never responded like this before. They've never deserved it before. With respect, sir. I don't think this is about what they deserved. Jun-ho's eyes went cold. Not angry. Just empty. Be careful, Min-jun. Yes, sir. Min-jun bowed slightly. I apologize if I overstepped. He turned to leave. Min-jun. He paused. She matters, Jun-ho said quietly. That's all you need to know. Minjun nodded slowly. Understood, sir. After he left, Junho sat alone in his office and allowed himself one small moment of honesty. The truth was, he didn't know when Imani Brooks had become more than just an employee. Maybe it was the first time she'd corrected a customer's pronunciation in Korean. Firm but polite, refusing to let them mispronounce a dish just because they were paying for it. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, head high, shoulders back, like she knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's approval. Maybe it was the fact that in 8 months, she'd never once asked him for anything. Not favors. Not special treatment. Not even acknowledgement. She'd simply shown up, done excellent work, and left. She didn't simper. Didn't flirt. Didn't try to get close to him the way others did when they realized who he was and what he could offer. She treated him with the same professional courtesy she showed everyone else. And somehow, that had gotten under his skin. But last night, watching those people mock her, reduce her, treat her like she was nothing, something inside Junho had gone very still and very cold. The kind of cold that came before calculated violence. He'd wanted to walk over to that table and make them understand what a mistake they'd made. But he'd been raised better than that. His father had taught him, power is quiet. Power is patient. Power is the ability to destroy someone so completely that they never even see you coming. So he'd waited. He'd watched. He'd planned. And now, 12 hours later, those people were experiencing exactly what happened when you crossed Junho Park. He'd protected her. That's what mattered. She was safe now. Those people would never bother her again. They'd never even think her name without feeling a spike of fear. Junho allowed himself a small, grim satisfaction. Justice had been served. At 11 a.m., he stood up from his desk and adjusted his tie. He'd check in on the restaurant. Make sure everything was running smoothly. And maybe, just maybe, he'd see her. Maybe she'd already heard what happened to the people from Table 7. News traveled fast in circles like theirs. Maybe she'd understand what he'd done. What he'd done for her. Junho walked through the restaurant with his usual calm authority. Staff nodded as he passed. Everything was in order. Tables set. Kitchen running. The lunch rush would start soon. And then he saw her. Imani stood near the host stand, talking to Sophie. She was early for her shift. She always was. She wore her uniform with the same quiet dignity she wore everything. Hair pulled back. Posture perfect. Beautiful. The word came unbidden, but Junho didn't fight it. She was beautiful. Not just in appearance, though she was striking, but in the way she carried herself. In the strength he could see in the set of her shoulders. As if sensing his gaze, Imani looked up. Their eyes met across the dining room. For a moment, neither moved. Junho thought he saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Or awareness. He nodded slightly. A acknowledgement. A greeting. Imani's expression didn't change. She looked at him for one long, measured moment. Then she looked away. Not angry. Not upset. Just away. Like he was a piece of furniture. Like he was nothing. Something tightened in Junho's chest. He told himself it didn't matter. She didn't need to thank him. He hadn't done it for gratitude. He'd done it because it was right. Because she'd been wronged in his establishment, under his watch, and he'd corrected it. That was enough. It had to be enough. But as Junho walked back to his office, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd miscalculated something fundamental. He'd given her justice. He'd destroyed her enemies. He'd used every ounce of his power to make things right. So why did she look at him like he'd failed her? And why did that look cut deeper than any insult those people could have thrown? Junho waited 3 days. 3 days to let the dust settle. 3 days to let the news spread. 3 days to give Imani time to hear what had happened to the people from Table 7. Because she would hear. Everyone had heard. David Choi's tech company had filed for bankruptcy on Tuesday. Christine Yang's lawsuits were front-page news in the business section. The others had quietly disappeared from their usual social circles, too humiliated to show their faces. It was the kind of fall that people whispered about in corners. The kind that made others nervous. The kind that sent a message. And the message was clear. Don't touch what belongs to Junho Park. He assumed Imani would understand. He assumed she'd connect the dots. He assumed, wrongly, that she'd be grateful. On Thursday evening, he found her in the storage room, counting inventory with a clipboard and a focused expression. Imani! She looked up, startled. Then something shuddered in her face. Mr. Park, she said evenly. Do you need something? Mr. Park. Not Junho. Not even sir. Just the formal distance of employer and employee. He stepped further into the small room, his presence filling the space in a way that made it suddenly feel much smaller. I wanted to check in, he said carefully. See how you're doing. Imani's expression didn't change. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. She turned back to her clipboard. Junho frowned slightly. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I heard about what happened, he continued. To the people from Table 7. Imani's pen paused for just a fraction of a second. Then she kept writing. Did you? She asked, her tone utterly neutral. Yes. Junho moved closer, his voice dropping lower. More intimate. Terrible luck, all of them experiencing difficulties at the same time. Now she did look at him, and the expression in her eyes made something cold slide down his spine. It wasn't fear. It wasn't awe. It wasn't even surprise. It was knowing, and beneath that knowing was something he couldn't quite identify. Something that looked almost like disappointment. Luck, Imani repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Junho's jaw tightened. He'd expected her to be smart enough to understand. And she was. What he hadn't expected was for her to look at him like this. Like she wished she didn't understand at all. They disrespected you, he said quietly. In my restaurant. Under my roof. That has consequences. Consequences, Imani echoed. She set down her clipboard with careful precision. Then she turned to face him fully, and Junho realized, too late, that he'd miscalculated badly. Let me ask you something, Mr. Park, she said, and her voice was so calm it was dangerous. When exactly did you decide those people deserved to be destroyed? The moment they humiliated you. The answer came quickly. Honestly. He thought it would help. It didn't. No, Imani said softly. That's not what I asked. I asked when you decided. Past tense. Because I remember that night very clearly. She took a step toward him. Not aggressive. Just. Present. Claiming space. I remember standing at their table while they mocked me. While they questioned my intelligence. While they treated me like I was stupid for daring to speak Korean in their presence. Another step. And I remember looking at you. Junho felt something twist in his chest. I remember our eyes meeting, Imani continued. I remember thinking, just for a second, that maybe you'd say something. Do something. Anything. Her voice didn't rise. Didn't crack. That made it worse somehow. But you didn't, she said. You stood there in your expensive suit with all your power and all your control, and you did absolutely nothing. I was planning. Imani finished. Calculating. Deciding the best way to handle it. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. You were being strategic, she said. I understand. Very smart. Very controlled. Very effective. The way she said effective made it sound like an insult. Imani. Those people are ruined now, she continued, cutting him off. Careers destroyed. Reputations shattered. Lives in pieces. All because of what they did to me. All because you decided, 3 days ago, that they needed to pay. She tilted her head slightly. Tell me something, Mr. Park. Where was all that decisive action when I actually needed it? The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Junho's hands clenched at his sides. I protected you, he said, and for the first time, there was something sharp in his voice. Something almost defensive. They'll never bother you again. They'll never bother anyone again. You protected me after, Imani said quietly. You destroyed them in private after you let them destroy me in public. That's not, isn't it? 2 words. That's all it took to make Junho Park, a man who'd built an empire on silence and strategy, feel like he was standing on unstable ground. You think I wanted a spectacle? He asked, his voice low and controlled. You think I should have caused a scene? Made it worse? I think, Imani said slowly, that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that costs you something. She picked up her clipboard again. But you didn't want to pay that cost, did you? You didn't want to risk your image, your reputation, your carefully controlled empire. So you stayed silent. That's not fair. No, Imani agreed. It's not. But it's honest. She moved past him toward the door. Junho caught her wrist, gently but firmly. Wait. Imani looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. Let go of me, she said softly. It wasn't a request. Junho released her immediately, something like alarm flickering across his features. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, Imani said. You meant for me to wait so you could explain, so you could make me understand why what you did was right. Why I should be grateful. She adjusted her grip on the clipboard. But here's the thing, Mr. Park. I don't want to understand. I don't want your explanations or your justifications. And I definitely don't want your revenge. It wasn't revenge, Junho said, his voice tight. It was justice. Imani laughed. It was a broken sound. Bitter and sad and so tired. Justice, she repeated. You really believe that, don't you? She shook her head. Justice would have been you standing beside me when it mattered. Justice would have been you speaking up in the moment. Justice would have been you risking something, anything, to defend me when I needed defending. Her eyes met his, and Junho felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. What you did wasn't justice, she said quietly. It was guilt. The word hit him like a slap. You felt bad that you didn't help me, Imani continued. So you punished them to make yourself feel better. To convince yourself that you'd done the right thing. That you'd protected me. She paused. But you can't protect someone retroactively, Mr. Park. That's not how it works. Then what do you want from me? Junho asked, and there was something raw in his voice now. Something almost desperate. Tell me what you want, and I'll. Nothing. One word. Absolute. Final. I want nothing from you, Imani said clearly. Not your power. Not your protection. Not your guilt-driven revenge. Nothing. She moved toward the door again. This time, Junho didn't stop her. But he did speak. I did it because I care. Imani stopped. Her hand was on the doorknob. Her back was to him. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, without turning around, she said, That's the saddest part. I actually believe you. She opened the door. But caring isn't enough when you don't have the courage to show it when it matters. And then she was gone. Junho stood alone in the storage room, surrounded by stacks of napkins and bottles of expensive wine. He'd destroyed 3 people for her. He'd used every connection, every favor, every ounce of power he'd spent years accumulating. He'd burned bridges and called in debts and reshaped the landscape of an entire social circle. For her. And she'd looked at him like he'd failed. Like he'd hurt her. The worst part. She was right. Junho had spent his entire life learning how to wield power. How to make people bend without them even realizing they were bowing. But no one had ever taught him the difference between power and courage. Between revenge and protection. Between loving someone and having the strength to stand beside them when it costs you something. And as he stood there in the silence she'd left behind, Junho Park realized something terrifying. He'd just shown Imani Brooks exactly how much he was willing to do for her. And she didn't want any of it. Because what she'd needed from him couldn't be bought or calculated or delivered 3 days late. She'd needed him to be brave. And he'd been strategic instead. The question was, could he learn the difference before he lost her completely? Or was it already too late? Imani made it exactly 3 steps out of the storage room before her hands started shaking. Not from fear. From rage. Pure, clean, burning rage that she'd been holding back for 3 days. She ducked into the employee bathroom, locked the door, and braced her hands against the sink. Breathe. Just breathe. But breathing didn't help when every cell in her body was screaming. He thought he'd helped her. He actually thought destroying those people would make it better. Like violence delivered in secret was somehow more noble than violence delivered in public. Like power wielded in shadows was less cowardly than silence. Imani looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back. Composed, professional, together. But inside, she was 17 again. Back in her high school cafeteria when 3 girls had accidentally spilled chocolate milk on her white shirt and the teacher had done nothing. Had just watched. She was 22 again. In her college seminar when a professor had questioned whether she'd really written her own paper, said her analysis was surprisingly sophisticated, and none of her classmates had said a word. She was every age she'd ever been when someone had hurt her and the people who could have helped had chosen comfort over courage. Chosen silence over solidarity. And now Junho Park thought he could fix it with phone calls and frozen bank accounts. Imani's phone buzzed. Danielle, you off soon? Want to grab dinner? She stared at the message. Then typed, Can you come get me? I need to talk. Danielle, on my way. 20 minutes. Imani splashed cold water on her face, fixed her makeup, and went back to finish her shift. She had tables to serve, bills to pay, a life to maintain. She wouldn't let Junho Park, or anyone else, make her run. 20 minutes later, Imani climbed into her sister's car and immediately felt the tension in her shoulders release slightly. Danielle took one look at her face and said, What happened? Drive first. Talk later. Danielle pulled out of the parking lot without another word. They ended up at their usual spot, a small Ethiopian restaurant in mid-city that reminded them of Sunday dinners at their grandmother's house. Warm, safe, home. They ordered. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Danielle set down her fork and said, Okay, talk to me. And Imani did. She told her sister everything. The humiliation at table 7. Junho's silence. The mysterious ruin of those 3 people. The confrontation in the storage room. All of it. When she finished, Danielle was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very carefully, So your boss destroyed 3 people because they disrespected you? Yes. And you're angry about it? Imani's laugh was sharp. You think I should be grateful? No, Danielle said slowly. But I also think most people would be. Most people would think, wow, someone actually defended me. Someone actually made them pay. He didn't defend me, Danny. He avenged me. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Imani's voice was firm. Defense happens in the moment. When someone is hurting you, and another person steps in and says, Stop. That's defense. That's courage. She leaned forward. What Junho did, that was revenge. That was him making himself feel better about the fact that he stood there and did nothing when I actually needed him. Danielle absorbed this. Did you want him to make a scene? I wanted him to make a choice. Imani's eyes burned. I wanted him to decide, right there in that moment, that my dignity was worth more than his comfort. That defending me was more important than maintaining his image. And he didn't. No. He calculated. He strategized. He waited until he could handle it quietly, privately, in a way that wouldn't cost him anything. Imani's voice cracked slightly. And then he expected me to thank him for it. Danielle reached across the table and took her sister's hand. What are you going to do? I don't know, Imani admitted. But I know I can't let this go. I can't pretend it's okay. I can't let him think that power is a substitute for courage. You could quit. I could. Imani had thought about it. Updated her resume at 4 a.m., remember? But that feels like running. Like letting him win. Then what? Imani was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I need to make him understand. Really understand. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. I need him to feel what I felt. Imani. Danielle's voice held a warning. He's not just your boss. From what you've told me, he's powerful, connected, dangerous. I know. And you're going to confront him anyway. Yes. Danielle studied her sister's face. Then she sighed. You're just like Grandma, you know that? Stubborn as hell and convinced that everyone can learn if you just explain it clearly enough. Imani smiled despite herself. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Danielle squeezed her hand. Just be careful, okay? Men like that don't usually handle being told they're wrong very well. Then it's time someone told him. The next morning, Imani walked into Moonlit Pearl with a purpose. She found Jun-ho in his office, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up when she knocked. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that careful neutrality he wore like armor. Imani, we need to talk, she said. Really talk. Not a conversation where you explain and I listen. An actual conversation where you hear me. Jun-ho closed his laptop slowly. I'm listening. No. Imani stepped fully into the office and closed the door behind her. You're not. You're preparing your defense. I can see it in your eyes. You're already deciding what you're going to say to convince me that what you did was right. His jaw tightened. That's not. It is. She moved closer to his desk. And I need you to stop. Just for 5 minutes, I need you to stop being strategic and calculating and controlled, and I need you to just listen. Something shifted in Jun-ho's expression. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Imani shook her head. I'll stand, thank you. A ghost of something. Surprise? Respect. Crossed his face. All right. Imani took a breath. You watched them break me, she said quietly. Jun-ho flinched. Actually flinched. I stood at that table, Imani continued, and they mocked my intelligence. They questioned my ability to understand Korean, a language I speak fluently. They reduced me to a stereotype in front of a room full of people. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched at her sides. And I looked at you. Do you remember that? Yes, Jun-ho said, his voice rough. I looked at you and I thought, just for a second, that maybe you'd help. Maybe you'd say something. Even just, I don't know. Walk over. Ask if everything was okay. Anything to let them know that their behavior wasn't acceptable. She paused. But you didn't. You stood there like a statue, and you let it happen. I was planning, Imani finished. I know. You've said that. You were being strategic, calculating the best response, deciding how to handle it without making a scene. She took a step closer. But here's what you don't seem to understand, Mr. Park. In that moment, I didn't need your strategy. I didn't need your calculation. I didn't need you to plot elaborate revenge schemes in the shadows. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I needed you to stand beside me. That's it. That's all. Just stand beside me and make it clear that what they were doing wasn't okay. Jun-ho's hands were flat on his desk now, knuckles white. It would have made things worse, he said. If I'd intervened publicly, it would have drawn more attention, made the situation bigger, caused a scene that would have embarrassed you. Imani interrupted softly. The words hung in the air like an accusation. That's what this is really about, isn't it? She continued. You didn't want to risk your reputation, your image, your carefully controlled empire. So you chose silence. That's not fair. Isn't it? Imani's eyes blazed. You have all this power, Mr. Park. All these connections. All this influence. You can destroy 3 people with a phone call. You can reshape entire businesses overnight. You can ruin lives without breaking a sweat. She leaned forward, hands braced on his desk. But you can't stand up for one black woman being humiliated in your own restaurant? That's too much. That's where you draw the line. You don't understand. No, Imani said firmly. You don't understand. You don't understand what it's like to be disrespected like that. To have your intelligence questioned. Your worth reduced. Your humanity dismissed. Her voice cracked slightly. And you don't understand what it's like to look for help and find silence instead. Junho stood abruptly. I destroyed them for you. I made them pay. They lost everything because of what they did to you. I didn't ask you to destroy them. Imani's voice rose for the first time. I asked you without words, but I asked you to defend me. In the moment, when it mattered. She straightened, pulling back from the desk. Everything you did afterward? That was for you. To make you feel better. To ease your guilt. To convince yourself that you'd done the right thing. That's not true. Isn't it? Silence. Heavy and thick and suffocating. Finally, Junho said quietly, What do you want me to say, Imani? I want you to say you understand, she replied. I want you to acknowledge that you made a choice that night. You chose your comfort over my dignity. You chose silence over solidarity. You chose strategy over courage. She moved toward the door. And I want you to understand that no amount of revenge, no matter how devastating, can undo that choice. Her hand was on the doorknob when Junho spoke again. I care about you. 3 words. Quiet. Almost vulnerable. Imani stopped but didn't turn around. I know, she said softly. But caring isn't enough when you don't have the courage to show it when someone's watching. She opened the door. When someone might judge you for it. When it might cost you something. And then she left. Junho stood alone in his office, and for the first time in his life, all his power felt utterly useless. Because the woman he'd destroyed 3 people for had just walked away. And there was nothing, no connection, no favor, no amount of money, that could bring her back. Unless he learned to do the one thing he'd spent his entire life avoiding. Be vulnerable enough to be brave. The question was, could he? The black car was waiting when Imani's shift ended. Same spot. Same driver. 3 nights in a row now. She'd ignored it the first night. Walked right past it to the bus stop like it didn't exist. The second night, she'd texted Danielle to pick her up. Made a point of getting into her sister's beat-up Honda while the expensive sedan just sat there, watching. Tonight, the third night, Imani was done being polite. She walked straight to the car and knocked on the tinted back window. It rolled down slowly. Junho sat in the back seat, looking infuriatingly calm in another perfectly tailored suit. This needs to stop, Imani said without preamble. I'm offering you a ride home, Junho replied evenly. It's late. The bus route isn't safe this time of night. I've been taking that bus route for 8 months. I'm fine. You shouldn't have to. Imani's jaw tightened. That's not your decision to make. Get in the car, Imani. It wasn't a request. Not quite an order either. Something in between that made her skin prickle with irritation. No. For a moment, surprise flickered across Junho's face. Like he genuinely hadn't expected her to refuse. Like he thought persistence was the same as persuasion. I'm trying to help you, he said. I didn't ask for your help. You shouldn't have to ask. And yet, Imani said coldly, when I actually needed help, when I was standing at table 7 being humiliated, you didn't offer it. Funny how that works. Junho's expression hardened. How long are you going to punish me for that? The audacity of the question made Imani laugh. A short, sharp sound with no humor in it. Punish you, she repeated. Is that what you think this is? She leaned down slightly, meeting his eyes through the window. I'm not punishing you, Mr. Park. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. She straightened and stepped back from the car. Stop sending your driver. Stop waiting for me. Stop acting like your attention is some kind of gift I should be grateful for. She turned and walked away. The car didn't follow. But Imani could feel his gaze on her back the entire way to the bus stop. The flowers arrived the next morning. 24 white roses. Elegant. Expensive. Delivered to the restaurant with a card that simply read, "I'm sorry." Imani looked at them for a long moment. Then she gave them to Sophie at the host stand. "Someone likes you," Sophie said with a knowing smile. "Someone thinks they can buy me," Imani corrected. "You keep them." By evening, the roses were gone. Sophie had taken them home, delighted. And Imani felt nothing but relief. The next day, it was a gift box. Designer. The kind with tissue paper that probably cost more than the actual gift. Inside, a silk scarf. The exact shade of deep burgundy that Imani had admired once, in a shop window 3 months ago. He'd noticed. He'd remembered. And somehow that made it worse. Imani returned the box unopened to his office. Left it on his desk with a sticky note. "No. Thank you." The gifts kept coming. A first edition book of poems by Nikki Giovanni. A reservation confirmation for the Korean art exhibit she'd mentioned wanting to see. A donation receipt to her favorite charity, made in her name. Each one more thoughtful than the last. Each one refused. And with each refusal, Imani could feel Junho's confusion growing. Because in his world, persistence was rewarded. Effort was appreciated. Expensive gestures meant something. But Imani wasn't from his world. And she was determined not to be pulled into it. "He's trying," Danielle said over FaceTime one evening. "You have to admit, he's really trying." Imani stirred her ramen with more force than necessary. Trying to do what? Win me? Prove something? Make himself feel better? Maybe he just likes you. He doesn't know me. He knows you turned down a scarf that probably cost 3 months of your rent. Exactly my point, Imani said. He thinks that's impressive. He thinks expensive equals meaningful. She took a bite of noodles, chewed, swallowed. He's pursuing me the same way he handles business. With strategy. With resources. With the assumption that if he just finds the right leverage, I'll give in. And you won't. No. Imani's voice was firm. Because I'm not a business deal. I'm not something to be won or acquired or convinced. Danielle was quiet for a moment. Then she said carefully, "What if he actually has feelings for you? Then he needs to learn that feelings aren't enough. Actions matter. And his actions showed me exactly who he is. People can change. Maybe, Imani allowed, but I'm not responsible for teaching him how." On Friday night, Junho was waiting when Imani finished her shift. Not in his car this time. In person. He stood near the employee exit, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortably human in the dim parking lot light. "I'd like to talk," he said when she emerged. Imani kept walking. "We've talked." "No." He fell into step beside her. "You've talked. I've listened. Badly. But I've listened. And I want to do better." Imani stopped walking. Turned to face him. "Better how? Have dinner with me." She almost laughed. "No. Not as..." He paused, searching for words. "Not as a date. Just a conversation. Let me explain." "You keep trying to explain," Imani interrupted. "But I don't need explanations, Mr. Park. I need you to understand something fundamental." She took a breath. "You can't pursue your way into my life. You can't gift your way into my trust. You can't strategize your way into my heart." Junho's expression was unreadable in the shadows. "What can I do?" he asked quietly. And for just a moment, Imani heard something genuine in his voice. Something almost lost. It would have been easy to feel sorry for him. Easy to soften. Easy to give him what he wanted just to make that look in his eyes go away. But Imani had learned long ago that making herself smaller never made anyone else bigger. "You can leave me alone," she said gently. "You can let me do my job without cars waiting and gifts arriving and all this pressure." "That's not what I'm trying to." "I know what you're trying to do," Imani said. You're trying to prove that you care, that you're different, that you're worth giving a chance. She met his eyes. But you're proving it to yourself, not to me. Because if you were really listening, really hearing what I need, you'd know that the best thing you could do right now is give me space. Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I don't want to give you space? The honesty of it, the raw admission, almost made Imani falter. Almost. Then you're not doing this for me, she said softly. You're doing it for you. She started walking again. This time, he didn't follow. But his voice carried across the parking lot. I'm not giving up on this. Imani stopped. Didn't turn around. That's the problem, Mr. Park. You think persistence is the same as devotion. You think not giving up makes you noble. She glanced back over her shoulder. But sometimes, not giving up just means you're not listening. That weekend, Imani came home to find a letter slipped under her apartment door. Not delivered by courier. Not in an expensive envelope. Just a letter. Handwritten on simple stationery. She stood in her doorway, staring at it for a full minute before picking it up. The handwriting was precise. Controlled. Every letter perfectly formed. Imani, I'm writing this because you asked me to stop pursuing you, and I'm trying to respect that. But I need you to know something. My entire life, I was taught that power is the solution to every problem. That if something is broken, you fix it. If someone wrongs you, you destroy them. If you want something, you take it. But you've shown me that some things can't be fixed with power. Some wounds can't be healed with revenge. Some people can't be claimed. I'm trying to understand that. I'm trying to be better. But I don't know how to stop wanting to be near you. I don't know how to see you and not want to protect you. I don't know how to accept that the best thing I can do for you might be nothing at all. So I'm asking, teach me. Not how to win you. Not how to convince you. Teach me how to love someone without possessing them. Because I'm beginning to realize that's what this is. And I have no idea what I'm doing. J. Imani read the letter twice. Then a third time. Then she folded it carefully and set it on her kitchen counter. She didn't respond. She didn't throw it away either. Because buried under all his mistakes and misunderstandings, Junho Park had just asked her a question no one had ever asked before. He'd asked her to teach him how to love without controlling. How to care without claiming. How to be present without possessing. And Imani had to decide, was that her responsibility? Or was she allowed to say that some lessons weren't hers to teach? Especially to a man who'd already shown her that when it mattered most. He chose silence over courage. Imani's mother called on Sunday morning. Baby, I had the strangest conversation yesterday. Imani was still in bed, phone pressed to her ear, already knowing she wasn't going to like where this was going. What kind of conversation, Mama? Well, Mrs. Chen from church, you know, the one whose son is a lawyer, she pulled me aside after service and asked if you were dating someone. Imani sat up. What? Apparently, her sister knows someone who works at some fancy Korean restaurant, and there's been talk. Of course there had. Mama, I'm not. She said there's a very wealthy man who's been asking about you. Sending gifts. Making quite the effort, from what I hear. Her mother's tone was carefully neutral. Too neutral. It's not like that, Imani said. Then what's it like? Good question. Imani ran a hand over her face. It's complicated. Complicated how? Is he married? No. Is he cruel? No. Not exactly. Then what's the problem? How did she explain this to her mother? How did she put into words that a man's wealth and power meant nothing when he didn't have the courage to stand beside you when it mattered? He's not who I thought he was, Imani said finally. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, baby, no man is ever who we think he is at first. That's what dating is for. You get to know them. You see if. I'm not dating him, Mama. But he wants to date you? He wants something, Imani said carefully. I'm not sure it's actually me. Another pause. Is he the reason you've been calling your sister at 3 in the morning? Imani closed her eyes. Of course Danielle had told their mother. Partly. Then I want to meet him. Mama. I want to meet the man who has my daughter this twisted up inside. That's non-negotiable. And that was that. Because when Imani's mother used that tone, calm, firm, absolute, there was no arguing. Imani didn't tell Jun-ho about her mother's request. She went to work Monday through Wednesday, kept her head down, served her tables with the same professional grace she'd always had, and pretended not to notice how Jun-ho watched her from across the dining room. He'd stopped sending gifts, stopped having his car wait for her. But he was always there, present, observing, like he was trying to figure out the right move in a game he was losing. On Thursday, he broke his silence. Imani. She was in the break room, eating a quick dinner before the evening rush. He appeared in the doorway like a shadow made solid. Mr. Park, she acknowledged without looking up from her salad. May I sit? She gestured to the chair across from her with her fork. It's your restaurant. He sat but didn't speak immediately. Just watched her eat with that unreadable expression he wore so well. Finally, Imani set down her fork. Was there something you needed? I got your message, he said quietly. I didn't send you a message. You didn't respond to my letter. That was a message. Fair enough. Imani took a sip of water. What did you want me to say? Anything. His voice was rougher than usual. Even if it was, leave me alone. At least that would be a response. You asked me to teach you something, Imani said carefully. I'm still deciding if I want that responsibility. I wasn't asking you to be responsible for me, Jun-ho said. I was asking for guidance, clarity, a chance to understand what I did wrong so I don't repeat it. You know what you did wrong. Do I? Imani met his eyes directly. Yes, she said firmly. You do. You just don't want to admit it because admitting it means acknowledging that all your power, all your connections, all your wealth, all your control, doesn't actually matter when it comes to courage. The word landed like a blade between them. Jun-ho's jaw tightened. I'm trying to fix it, Imani finished. I know. With gifts and rides and letters and all these gestures that cost you money but don't cost you anything real. She leaned forward slightly. But here's what you need to understand, Mr. Park. I don't want your money. I don't want your protection. I don't want your revenge or your gifts or your carefully calculated attempts to make me see you differently. What do you want? The question was quiet, almost vulnerable. Imani considered it. I want to go to work without feeling like I'm being pursued, she said. I want to do my job without wondering what you're planning next. I want to exist in my own life without your presence constantly pressing in on me. That's all. That's everything. Jun-ho was quiet for a long moment. Then, and if I can't give you that? If I can't just stop? It was the most honest thing he'd said to her. And the most damning. Then you're proving my point, Imani said softly. You're proving that this isn't about what I need. It's about what you want. And what you want is to feel like you've fixed something. Like you've won something back. She stood, gathering her things. But I'm not something to be won, Mr. Park. I'm not a problem to be solved or a conquest to be achieved. I'm a person who needed someone to stand beside her, and you chose not to. I'm choosing differently now. Now is too late. 4 words. Absolute. Final. Imani walked toward the door. My mother wants to meet you, she said without turning around. She could feel his surprise without seeing it. What? Apparently word has gotten around about your efforts. And my mother doesn't like mysteries involving her daughters. Imani glanced back over her shoulder. Sunday dinner. 4 o'clock. If you're serious about understanding me, really understanding me, that's where it starts. With the people who raised me. The community that shaped me. The world that made me who I am. She paused. But I'm warning you now. You can't buy your way through this. You can't charm your way through this. My mother will see right through any performance you try to give. I'm not trying to perform, Junho said. Good. Imani turned back to the door. Because she'll eat you alive if you are. She left him sitting there in the break room. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Imani felt like she had some control back. Because Junho Park could destroy businesses with a phone call. But could he survive Sunday dinner with a black woman's family? Could he sit at a table where his wealth meant nothing and his power was irrelevant? Could he be just a man? Not a boss. Not a protector. Not a dangerous force in an expensive suit. Just a man who'd made a mistake and was trying to understand it. Imani doubted it. But she was willing to let him try. That night, Danielle called. Mama told me you're bringing someone to Sunday dinner. I didn't say I was bringing him, Imani corrected. I told him he was invited. There's a difference. Oh my God, he's actually coming? I don't know yet. I just told him an hour ago. Imani. Danielle's voice was serious now. Are you sure about this? Bringing him into the family? That's a big step. I'm not bringing him in, Imani said. I'm testing him. I want to see if he can exist in my world the way he expects me to exist in his. And if he can't, then I'll know for certain what I already suspect. Which is... Imani looked out her apartment window at the glittering Los Angeles skyline. That he's more interested in possessing me than knowing me. That he wants the idea of me more than the reality. That all his pursuit is just another form of control. She paused. And if that's true, then walking away won't even be hard. It'll just be necessary. Danielle was quiet for a moment. And if I'm wrong, Imani continued softly. If he actually shows up and is genuine and meets my family with respect and humility? Then what? Then? Imani's voice trailed off. Because she hadn't let herself think that far ahead. Hadn't let herself imagine what it might feel like if Junho Park actually understood what she needed. What it might mean if he chose courage over comfort. If he proved that his feelings were real and not just another form of possession. Then I'll have to decide, Imani said finally, if understanding is enough to heal what his silence broke. Is it? Imani closed her eyes. I don't know, she admitted. But I'm about to find out. The invitation had been sent. Sunday dinner. 4 o'clock. A table where wealth didn't matter and power held no weight. A test Junho Park couldn't strategize his way through. He'd have to show up as himself. Flawed, uncertain, human. And Imani would finally see if the man beneath all that control was someone worth knowing, or just another powerful man who confused possession with love. The answer would determine everything. But first, he had to be brave enough to show up. Junho didn't confirm whether he'd come to Sunday dinner. He just showed up. At 3:47 p.m. on Sunday, Imani's phone buzzed. Unknown number. I'm outside. She looked out her apartment window. A familiar black car sat at the curb. Of course he'd want to drive her. Of course he'd try to control even this. Imani grabbed her purse and headed downstairs. When she reached the car, she didn't get in. Just tapped on the window. It rolled down. I'm driving myself, she said. You can follow if you want. Junho looked like he wanted to argue. Then he just nodded. All right. Imani got into her 12-year-old Toyota and pulled out into traffic. In her rearview mirror, the black sedan followed. And despite everything, despite all her walls and anger and determination to keep him at a distance, a small part of her wondered what he'd be like with her family. If he'd be different. If he'd be real. Imani's mother lived in View Park, in a house that had been in the family for 3 generations. Modest by LA standards. Immaculate by any standard. The kind of home where you took your shoes off at the door and the smell of Sunday dinner started on Saturday night. Junho parked behind Imani's car. He emerged in dark slacks and a simple button-down shirt. No tie. No suit jacket. He looked almost normal. Almost approachable. Ready? Imani asked. Junho's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Good, she thought. Let him be nervous. Your mother knows about. She knows you're interested, Imani interrupted. She doesn't know the details. And she doesn't need to. This is just dinner. Just dinner, Junho repeated. With judgment, Imani added. Lots of judgment. My family doesn't trust easily, and they definitely don't trust wealthy men who show up out of nowhere pursuing their daughter. She started walking toward the house. Still want to come in? For a moment, she thought he might say no. Then, yes. They climbed the steps to the front porch together. Imani reached for the doorbell, but the door opened before she could ring. Danielle stood there, arms crossed, eyes sharp. So you actually came, she said to Junho. Your sister invited me. My sister tests people. Danielle's smile didn't reach her eyes. And you're about to be tested. She stepped aside to let them in. The house smelled like roasted chicken, collard greens, and cornbread. Like home. Like safety. Like everything Junho's world wasn't. Mama's in the kitchen, Danielle said. And before you ask, yes, she's been cooking since yesterday. And yes, she's going to feed you until you can't move. It's how she shows love. She paused, looking Junho up and down. And how she evaluates character. You can tell a lot about a man by how he handles a black woman's kitchen table. Junho met her gaze steadily. I look forward to it. Danielle's eyebrow raised slightly. We'll see. Dinner was tense. Not hostile. Just watchful. Imani's mother, Gloria Brooks, was a retired school principal with steel in her spine and warmth in her eyes. She asked questions with the precision of a prosecutor and the kindness of a grandmother. So, Junho, she said, passing him the greens. Imani tells me you own the restaurant where she works. Yes, ma'am. And how did you come to own a restaurant at such a young age? Family business, Junho said carefully. My father invested in several properties. I took over management when I turned 25. Took over, Gloria repeated. That's a lot of responsibility. It is. And do you have siblings? Someone to share that burden with? No, ma'am. I'm an only child. Gloria nodded slowly, absorbing this. That must have been lonely. The observation caught Junho off guard. Imani saw it in the way his hand paused over his plate. Sometimes, he admitted. Imani and Danielle were always close, Gloria continued. Even when they fought, and Lord, did they fight, they had each other. I can't imagine raising a child alone in all that pressure. She said pressure, like she could see the weight of it on him. Like she understood something about his life that Imani hadn't fully considered. Junho's expression softened slightly. My mother did her best. I'm sure she did. Gloria's tone was kind but probing. Is she here in Los Angeles? Yes. And does she know you're pursuing my daughter? Silence. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Junho set down his fork carefully. She knows I care about Imani. She doesn't approve. Why not? Another pause. Imani watched him struggle with how much truth to give. Finally, he said quietly, my mother has very specific ideas about who I should be with. Someone from our community. Someone who understands our obligations. You mean someone Korean, Gloria said bluntly. Yes. And Imani is not. No. Gloria took a sip of her sweet tea. So you're here, at this table, pursuing a woman your mother disapproves of. A woman who works for you. A woman who, I'm guessing from the tension I'm sensing, has made it clear she's not interested. Junho's eyes flicked to Imani. Then back to Gloria. She's made it clear, he said carefully, that I've made mistakes. And that I need to understand what those mistakes cost. And do you? Gloria asked. Understand. I'm trying to. Trying isn't the same as doing. The words were gentle but firm. Exactly the kind of thing Gloria Brooks would say. Junho nodded. No, ma'am. It's not. Gloria studied him for a long moment. Then she said, Why Imani? The question caught everyone off guard. Mama, Imani started. No, baby. I want to hear this. Gloria's eyes never left Junho. You own a restaurant. You clearly have money, access, options. So why my daughter? What is it about her specifically that has you sitting at my table being interrogated? Junho didn't answer immediately. When he did speak, his voice was quiet but certain. She's the only person who's ever looked at me and seen through everything else. The money, the power, the reputation. She sees me, and she's not impressed. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Most people want something from me. She wants nothing. Most people treat me carefully, like I might break or retaliate. She treats me like I'm accountable. He paused. She makes me want to be better than I am. Even when, especially when, I fail. The table was silent. Gloria exchanged a look with Danielle. Then she said, "That's a nice answer. It's the truth." Maybe. Gloria's expression was unreadable. But truth and wisdom aren't always the same thing. You can be truthful about your feelings and still be wrong about what to do with them. She stood, beginning to clear plates. Imani, help me in the kitchen, please. It wasn't a request. In the kitchen, Gloria turned to her daughter with raised eyebrows. He's in love with you. He thinks he is, Imani corrected. What's the difference? The difference is that being in love requires actually knowing someone, understanding them, seeing them as a whole person, not just an idea. Gloria dried a dish thoughtfully. And you don't think he sees you? I think he sees what he wants to see. A woman who challenges him, who doesn't need his money, who makes him feel like he's earned something instead of just inherited it. Imani took a breath. But he doesn't see the part where I needed him and he wasn't there. Or he sees it and thinks he can fix it with grand gestures and persistence. Can he? No. The word was firm. Absolute. Gloria set down her dish towel. Baby, I raised you to know your worth. To never settle. To never let anyone, man or woman, black or white or any other color, make you feel less than whole. I know, Mama. So I'm not going to tell you to give that man a chance if you don't want to. I'm not going to say he deserves your forgiveness just because he showed up here and was polite. Gloria took Imani's hands in hers. But I am going to say this. Holding on to anger is exhausting. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't holding your ground. It's deciding whether the ground is even worth standing on. She squeezed Imani's hands. You don't owe him anything. But you do owe yourself peace. Whatever that looks like. Before Imani could respond, the doorbell rang. Both women froze. Were you expecting someone else? Imani asked. Gloria shook her head. From the dining room, they heard Danielle's voice. Imani, you might want to come out here. Imani and her mother exchanged looks and headed back to the dining room. A woman stood in the doorway. Korean, late 50s. Elegant in the way that came from money and breeding. Her posture was perfect. Her expression was cold. And she was looking at Junho with the kind of disappointment that could freeze oceans. Mother, Junho said, standing abruptly. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same question, Madam Park replied in Korean. Then, switching to English with barely an accent, but I already know the answer. Her gaze shifted to Imani. You must be the waitress. The word landed like a slap. Not employee. Not woman my son is interested in. Waitress. Reduced. Diminished. Dismissed. Imani felt her spine straighten. I'm Imani Brooks, she said clearly. And you're in my mother's home. You might want to adjust your tone. Madam Park's smile was sharp as glass. Oh, my dear. I don't think you understand the situation you're in. She stepped further into the house, uninvited, unwelcome. But you will. And in that moment, Imani realized, this wasn't just about Junho anymore. This was about to become a war. The silence in Gloria Brooks' living room was suffocating. Madam Park stood in the doorway like she owned the space, her designer handbag clutched in manicured hands, her expression a perfect mask of controlled disdain. Gloria was the first to speak. "Ma'am," she said with careful politeness, "I don't believe you were invited." "I don't require invitations to protect my family," Madam Park replied smoothly. She turned to Jun-ho, switching to Korean. "We're leaving. Now." "Mother." "Now, Jun-ho." But Jun-ho didn't move. And something in that stillness, that quiet defiance, seemed to surprise everyone in the room, including his mother. Madam Park's eyes narrowed. "You're embarrassing yourself. And our family." "No," Jun-ho said quietly, still in Korean. "You're embarrassing yourself by coming here uninvited and being disrespectful to people who've shown me nothing but hospitality." He switched to English, his gaze moving to Gloria. "Mrs. Brooks, I apologize for my mother's intrusion. She had no right to." "Don't apologize for me," Madam Park snapped, also switching to English. "I have every right to protect my son from making a mistake that will cost him everything." "I'm not a mistake," Imani said softly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She stood beside her mother, shoulders back, chin raised, looking at Madam Park with a kind of quiet strength that came from years of facing people who underestimated her. "I'm a person," Imani continued, "with a name, a family, a life that existed long before your son decided to pursue me and will continue long after he stops." She took a step forward. "And I'm standing in my mother's home, a home filled with love and history and dignity, while you're standing in the doorway acting like you have authority here." Imani's voice was calm, measured, devastating. "You don't." Madam Park's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Then it hardened again. "You think you know my son?" she asked. "You think working at his restaurant for a few months gives you insight into who he is? What he needs?" "I think," Imani replied evenly, "that I know enough to recognize when someone is more concerned with control than with actual care." The words landed like a blade. "How dare you?" "Mother, stop." Jun-ho's voice cut through the tension. "Stop talking. Stop assuming. Just stop." He moved between his mother and Imani. Not protecting. Not defending. Just choosing. "You taught me that family comes first," Jun-ho said quietly, looking at his mother. "That duty matters. That reputation is everything." A pause. "But you never taught me what to do when duty feels like a cage. When reputation feels like a performance. When the life you planned for me feels like someone else's story." Madam Park's face went pale. "Jun-ho." "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. "Not because I'm trying to rebel against you. Not because I don't respect our family. But because for the first time in my life, I'm making a choice that's mine." He glanced at Imani. "Even if she doesn't choose me back." The vulnerability in those words, the raw honesty, made Imani's breath catch. Madam Park stood frozen for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Jun-ho acknowledged. "But at least it will be my regret. Not yours." His mother's expression crumpled for just a second. Then she rebuilt it, brick by brick, into something cold and impenetrable. "I see," she said softly. She looked at Imani one last time. Not with anger now. With something almost like pity. "Good luck," she said. "You'll need it." Then she turned and walked out. The sound of the door closing felt final. After a moment of thick silence, Gloria cleared her throat. "Well," she said, "that was eventful." Danielle let out a breath she'd apparently been holding. Understatement of the year, Mama. Jun-ho stood very still, his expression unreadable. Gloria walked over and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You okay, son?" The kindness in her voice, the casual use of son, seemed to undo something in Jun-ho. His jaw tightened, and he nodded without speaking. "Why don't you and Imani take a walk?" Gloria suggested. "Get some air. Talk. We'll save you some pie." She looked at her daughter. "Go on, baby. Y'all need to have a real conversation." without an audience. Imani wanted to refuse, wanted to stay in the safety of her mother's house. But Gloria was right. This needed to happen. Okay, Imani said quietly. They walked in silence for 2 blocks. The neighborhood was quiet on Sunday evening. Families finishing dinner. Kids playing basketball in driveways. The sound of gospel music drifting from open windows. Finally, Junho spoke. I'm sorry about my mother. Don't apologize for her, Imani said. You didn't invite her. No, but I should have known she'd find out. She has resources. Like you. Yes. He didn't deny it. Like me. They reached a small park and sat on a bench facing the playground. For a while, neither spoke. Then Junho said, I need to tell you something. Okay. When I saw those people humiliate you, when I stood there and did nothing, it wasn't because I didn't care. Imani's hands clenched in her lap. It was because I cared too much, Junho continued. And I didn't know what to do with it. He turned to face her. I've spent my entire life being taught that emotion is weakness. That public displays are beneath us. That the right way to handle problems is quietly, strategically, without letting anyone see that you're affected. His voice roughened. But watching them mock you, watching them question your intelligence, reduce you to a stereotype, treat you like you were less than, it did something to me. What did it do? Imani asked quietly. It made me want to destroy them, Junho said simply. Right there. In front of everyone. I wanted to walk over to that table and make them understand what a mistake they'd made. He looked away. But I didn't. Because that's not how I was raised. So I stood there. I calculated. I planned. And I told myself I was doing the right thing. But you weren't. No. The admission seemed to cost him something. I wasn't. Silence settled between them again. Then Imani said, Why are you telling me this? Junho met her eyes. Because I need you to understand that when I destroyed those people, when I froze their accounts and ruined their reputations and made sure they'd never bother you again, I wasn't trying to control you or possess you or win you. He paused. I was trying to fix the fact that I failed you. I was trying to prove to myself that I wasn't the coward I felt like in that moment. And did it work? Imani asked. Did destroying them make you feel better? No. The word was immediate. Honest. Because you looked at me like I'd hurt you all over again. And that's when I realized that revenge isn't the same as courage. That power isn't the same as presence. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've been taught my whole life that having power means you've succeeded. That being able to control outcomes means you're strong. But you've shown me something different. What's that? That real strength is standing beside someone when it costs you something. When people are watching. When it's uncomfortable or inconvenient or might damage your reputation. Junho's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I destroyed those men because I couldn't stand to see you hurt. But if I really couldn't stand it. He trailed off. Imani finished the thought for him. Why did you stand there? The question hung in the air between them. The same question she'd asked before. But this time it wasn't an accusation. It was an invitation. An invitation for him to really answer. To really understand. Junho was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Because I was afraid. 2 words that clearly cost him everything to say. Afraid of what? Imani asked gently. Afraid of being seen as emotional. Afraid of causing a scene. Afraid of. He struggled for the words. Afraid of caring about you publicly. Afraid of what it would mean if everyone in that room knew that you mattered to me. He turned to look at her fully. Because if they knew you mattered, then they'd know I had a vulnerability. Something that could be used against me. Someone who could be hurt to hurt me. Imani's breath caught. Because she understood, suddenly, what he was really saying. You stayed silent to protect yourself, she said softly. Not me. Yes. The admission seemed to break something in him. I told myself it was strategy. that I was handling it the right way. But the truth is, I was protecting my own comfort over your dignity. He ran a hand through his hair. And I've been trying to make up for it ever since. With power. With revenge. With pursuit. Because I didn't know how to just apologize. How to admit that I was wrong without trying to fix it with action. Imani absorbed this. For the first time since the night at Table 7, she saw Junho Park as something other than powerful or dangerous or calculating. She saw him as human. Flawed. Afraid. Trying. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being honest." Junho looked at her with something like hope in his eyes. "Does it change anything?" Imani considered the question carefully. "It changes my understanding of what happened," she said. "It helps me see that your silence wasn't about not caring. It was about caring in a way that prioritized your own safety over mine." She paused. "But understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean the hurt goes away." The hope in Junho's expression flickered. "So where does that leave us?" Imani stood from the bench. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I know that I need time, space, room to figure out if understanding is enough." She looked down at him. "You've been honest with me tonight. More honest than you've probably been with anyone. And I appreciate that. But honesty is just the first step. The question is, what do you do with it now?" Junho stood as well. "What do you need from me?" And that question, simple, direct, focused on her needs instead of his wants, was the first truly right thing he'd asked. "I need you to stop pursuing me," Imani said quietly. "Stop trying to win me or fix this or prove yourself. I need you to just be. Let me figure out who you are when you're not performing. When you're not trying to control the outcome." She started walking back toward her mother's house. "And then, maybe, I'll figure out if the man you actually are is someone I could ever trust again." Imani typed her resignation letter on a Tuesday afternoon. Not at home. Not late at night in a fit of emotion. At 2:47 p.m., during her lunch break, sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Moonlit Pearl. She'd been thinking about it for 2 weeks. Since Sunday dinner. Since Junho's confession. Since his mother had looked at her with that particular brand of disdain that said you'll never be enough. The letter was professional. Courteous. Brief. "Dear Mr. Park, please accept this as my formal resignation from my position at Moonlit Pearl, effective 2 weeks from today. I've appreciated the opportunity to work here and have learned a great deal during my time on your staff. However, I've decided to pursue other opportunities that better align with my long-term goals. Thank you for the experience. Sincerely, Imani Brooks." She read it 3 times. Changed nothing. Printed it at the coffee shop's business center, signed it by hand, and slipped it into an envelope. Then she sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at it. This was real. She was actually doing this. Walking away from the best-paying job she'd had since graduating. Walking away from co-workers she liked. Walking away from a place that, despite everything, had taught her things about herself. Walking away from him. Imani took a deep breath. Then she picked up the envelope and headed back to the restaurant. The dining room was in that quiet lull between lunch and dinner service. A few staff members were setting tables. The kitchen was prepping for the evening rush. Everything looked normal, but Imani felt like she was moving through a dream. She found Sophie at the host stand. "Is Mr. Park in his office?" Sophie nodded. "Yeah, I think so. You okay? You look, I don't know, different." "I'm fine," Imani said. "Just need to talk to him about something." She walked down the hallway to Junho's office. The door was partially open. She knocked anyway. "Come in." Junho was at his desk, reviewing what looked like vendor contracts. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite hope, not quite fear, just awareness. "Imani, I need to give you this." She held out the envelope. Junho took it, his eyes never leaving her face. He didn't open it immediately. Just held it, like he already knew what it said. "You're leaving," he said quietly. Not a question. Yes. Why? Imani had prepared for this question, had practiced her answer. Something professional about career growth and new opportunities. But standing there, looking at him, she found she couldn't lie. "Because I can't be here anymore," she said simply. "Because every shift feels like I'm waiting for something to happen. Every time I see you, I'm reminded of that night. Of your silence. Of everything that came after." She paused. "And I'm tired of feeling like I'm in a story someone else is writing." Junho set the envelope down carefully. "I've given you space. Like you asked. I haven't pursued you. Haven't sent gifts. Haven't." "I know," Imani interrupted gently. "And I appreciate that. But space isn't enough when we're still in the same building. When I still work for you. When there's still this imbalance." "So you're running." The word stung. Imani felt her spine straighten. "No," she said firmly. "I'm choosing. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." Imani took a step closer to his desk. "Running is when you leave because you're afraid. Choosing is when you leave because you know your worth. Because you know that staying in a situation that hurts you, even if it pays well, even if it's comfortable, even if someone is finally trying to do better, isn't what you deserve." She held his gaze. "I deserve peace, Mr. Park. And I can't have that here." Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened the envelope and read the letter. When he finished, he set it down and looked at her with something raw in his expression. 2 weeks. Standard notice. What if I asked you to stay? I'd say no. What if I told you I need you here? I'd say that's not my responsibility." Junho stood abruptly, walked to the window, stood there with his back to her, hands in his pockets. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I've been trying to be different, to understand, to give you what you need without pushing. And now you're leaving anyway." "I know you're trying," Imani said. "But trying doesn't mean I have to stay and watch. Trying doesn't mean I owe you the chance to prove yourself." She moved closer but didn't touch him. "You hurt me. Not intentionally, maybe, but deeply. And healing from that doesn't happen just because you've stopped making it worse." "So what do I do?" There was something almost desperate in his voice now. "Tell me what to do, and I'll—" "Nothing," Imani said softly. "You do nothing. You let me go. You accept my resignation. You let me walk away with my dignity intact." She paused. "That's what you should have done that night. Let me keep my dignity. And that's what I'm asking you to do now." Junho turned to face her. His expression was carefully controlled, but his eyes betrayed him. He looked devastated. "And if I can't," he asked, "if I can't just let you walk away?" "Then you prove that you haven't learned anything," Imani replied. "That this was never about what I needed. It was always about what you wanted." The words hung in the air between them. Finally, Junho nodded slowly. "I'll accept your resignation," he said, his voice rough. "I'll process it today. You don't need to work the 2 weeks if you don't want to." "I want to," Imani said. "I want to finish properly. Say goodbye to people. Leave on my own terms." "All right." Silence. Then Imani said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not making this harder than it needs to be." Junho's laugh was bitter. "You think this isn't hard?" "I think it's hard for both of us," Imani said gently. "But necessary." She turned to leave. "Imani." She stopped, hand on the doorknob. "I meant what I said that night. After dinner with your family. I do. I do have feelings for you." Imani closed her eyes briefly, then looked back at him. "I know," she said quietly. "But feelings aren't enough when the foundation is broken. When trust is gone. When every interaction is weighted with history and hurt." She offered him a sad smile. "Maybe in another life, in a different story, your feelings would matter more. Maybe if we'd met differently. If that night had never happened. If you'd been brave when it counted. She opened the door. But we didn't. And it did. And you weren't. And that's it. Junho asked. That's just it. Yes, Imani said. That's it. She walked out and closed the door softly behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took several deep breaths. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. But she'd done it. She'd chosen herself. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur. Imani worked her shifts with the same professionalism she'd always had. She trained her replacement, a bright-eyed grad student named Maya who asked 1,000 questions and took detailed notes. She said goodbye to Sophie, who cried and made Imani promise to stay in touch. She exchanged numbers with the kitchen staff who'd always been kind to her. And she avoided Junho. Not obviously. Not dramatically. She just didn't seek him out. Didn't create opportunities for them to be alone. Kept their interactions professional and brief. If he noticed, he didn't say anything. He'd kept his word. Given her space. Let her finish on her own terms. It was the most respectful thing he'd ever done for her. And somehow, that made leaving both easier and harder. On her last shift, a quiet Thursday evening, Imani finished her tables, changed out of her uniform for the last time, and walked through the dining room one final time. The crystal chandelier above table 7 still gleamed. The marble floors still shone. Everything looked exactly the same. But Imani was different. Stronger. Clearer. More certain of who she was and what she deserved. She was almost to the door when she heard his voice. Imani. She turned. Junho stood near the entrance to his office. Not approaching. Just watching. Good luck, he said quietly. With whatever comes next. Imani nodded. Thank you. She wanted to say more. Wanted to tell him that she hoped he learned from this. That she hoped he found someone who could love him without the weight of their history. That she hoped he became the man he was trying to be. But she didn't. Because those hopes weren't hers to carry anymore. Goodbye, Mr. Park, she said instead. And then she walked out of Moonlit Pearl for the last time. Imani stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, breathing in the cool night air. Behind her, through the windows, she could see the warm glow of the dining room. The elegant tables. The beautiful space. The life she was leaving behind. Ahead of her was uncertainty. Job hunting. Financial stress. Starting over. But also, freedom. Peace. The chance to build something new on her own terms. She pulled out her phone and called Danielle. Hey, her sister answered. How'd it go? I did it, Imani said. I'm done. How do you feel? Imani considered the question. Sad. Relieved. Scared. Free. All of it at once. I feel like myself again, she said finally. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. A real smile. Unburdened. Unowned. Come get me, she asked. Already on my way. Imani ended the call and looked back at the restaurant one last time. Junho stood in the window, a silhouette backlit by warm light. Still watching. Still hoping. Still not understanding that some women can't be saved. Some women can't be bought. And some women will walk away, not because they're afraid, but because they finally love themselves enough to leave. 3 days after Imani left Moonlit Pearl, Junho showed up at her apartment. She knew it was him before she even looked through the peephole. There was something about the quality of the knock, firm but not aggressive, patient but insistent, that could only be him. Imani considered not answering. She'd left the restaurant. Left that chapter of her life. She didn't owe him anything. But something made her open the door anyway. Maybe curiosity. Maybe closure. Maybe just the need to prove to herself that seeing him wouldn't undo all the progress she'd made. Junho stood in the hallway, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. His hair wasn't perfectly styled. His shirt, still expensive, still well-fitted, was slightly wrinkled. He looked human. Tired. Lost. Hi, he said quietly. How did you get my address? Imani asked. A ghost of something, regret? Shame? Crossed his face. I've always had it. Employee records. Of course he had. That's an invasion of privacy, Mr. Park. I know. He didn't defend himself. Didn't justify it. Just acknowledged it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here. No, Imani agreed. You shouldn't. But she didn't close the door. They stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Junho said, "Can we talk? Just one last time." Imani wanted to say no. Wanted to close the door and go back to the job applications she'd been reviewing. Wanted to protect the peace she'd been carefully rebuilding. But there was something in his expression that made her hesitate. Not hope. Not expectation. Just quiet desperation. 5 minutes, she said finally. And we're talking out here. You're not coming into my home. Junho nodded. Thank you. Imani stepped into the hallway and closed her apartment door behind her. Leaned against it with her arms crossed. A physical barrier. A statement. What do you want, Mr. Park? Junho, he said quietly. You can call me Junho. You don't work for me anymore. What do you want, Junho? He took a breath. Like he was preparing for something difficult. I want to know if there's anything I can do, he said. Anything at all. To fix this. To make things right between us. Imani had expected this question. Had known, somehow, that he wouldn't be able to let it go without asking one more time. Why? She asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. Why? Yes. Why do you need to fix this? Why does it matter so much to you that things are right between us? Junho struggled for words. Because what happened was wrong. Because I hurt you. Because you can't stand the idea of failing at something, Imani interrupted gently. Because your whole life, you've been able to control outcomes. Fix problems. Make things work. And I'm the one thing that won't bend to your will. She tilted her head slightly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not love. Not genuine feeling. Control. That's not fair. Isn't it? Imani's voice was soft but unwavering. You destroyed 3 people because they disrespected me. You pursued me with gifts and gestures and persistence. You showed up at my family's home uninvited. And now you're here, at my apartment, asking what you can do to fix things. She took a step closer. Every single one of those actions was about you taking control. You deciding. You fixing. You making things happen on your terms. I'm trying to make amends. No, Imani said firmly. You're trying to feel better about yourself. There's a difference. The words hit him like a physical blow. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw tightened. You think I don't care about you? He asked, and there was real pain in his voice now. You think this is just about my ego? I think you care, Imani said honestly. But I also think you don't know the difference between caring about someone and needing to possess them. Between loving someone and needing them to validate you. She softened slightly. And I think that's not your fault. I think you were raised in a world where power and love got confused. Where protection meant control. Where caring for someone meant making decisions for them. Junho looked at her with something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. Teach me the difference, he said quietly. Please. I know I've asked before, but teach me how to do this right. And God, for just a moment, Imani was tempted. Tempted to step into that role. To be the woman who fixed him. Who showed him how to love properly. Who sacrificed her own healing to guide him through his. But she'd been that woman before. In other relationships. Other situations. The woman who taught men how to treat her. Who explained and educated and patiently waited for them to understand. And she was tired. So tired. No, she said gently. Junho flinched. No, no, Imani repeated. Because teaching you isn't my job. Fixing you isn't my responsibility. And waiting around while you figure out how to love me properly isn't fair to either of us. She took a breath. You asked me what you can do to make this right. And the answer is simple. Tell me. Let me go. 2 words. Quiet. Absolute. Final. Junho went very still. That's it? That's all you want from me? Yes. I don't believe you. Imani smiled sadly. I know. Because in your world, everyone wants something. Everyone has a price. Everyone can be convinced or bought or persuaded. She met his eyes directly. But I don't want your money. I don't want your power. I don't want your protection or your pursuit or your promises to do better. A pause. I just want peace. And I can't have that while you're still holding on. So you're asking me to stop fighting for you. I'm asking you to respect me enough to accept my choice. The distinction seemed to cut through him. And if I can't? Junho asked, his voice barely above a whisper. If I can't just let you walk away? Then you're proving that you never really saw me at all, Imani said quietly. That what you fell for was the idea of me. The challenge. The woman who said no when everyone else said yes. She straightened, pulling away from the door. But if you actually care about me, if you actually want what's best for me instead of what's easiest for you, then you'll let me go. You'll stop showing up. Stop hoping. Stop waiting for me to change my mind. You're asking me to give up. I'm asking you to grow up. The words were harsh, but her tone was gentle. Real love isn't about persistence, Junho. It's not about wearing someone down or proving your devotion through grand gestures. It's about respecting their boundaries, honoring their choices, even when those choices hurt you. Tears pricked at the corners of Imani's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Especially when those choices hurt you. Junho stood there, looking at her like she was something precious slipping through his fingers. Like he was watching his last chance disappear. I don't know how to stop wanting you, he admitted. Then learn, Imani said. But learn somewhere else. Without me. She reached for her door handle. Goodbye, Junho. Wait. His hand shot out, not to grab her, but just reaching. Suspended in the space between them. Can I ask you one more question? Imani hesitated, then nodded. If I had defended you that night, Junho said slowly. If I had stood up for you in the moment instead of handling it later, would we be having a different conversation right now? It was the question that had been hanging between them this whole time. The what if that they'd both been dancing around. Imani considered it carefully. Honestly. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe. Maybe not. But at least I would have known that when it mattered, when I needed someone to choose courage over comfort, you were capable of it. She paused. And that would have been a foundation we could build on. Trust. Respect. The knowledge that you'd stand beside me when it cost you something. Instead of just revenge after the fact. Yes. Junho lowered his hand. I wish I could go back. So do I, Imani said softly. But we can't. And we can't build a future on regret. She opened her door. Take care of yourself, Junho. I mean that. And then, before he could respond, she stepped inside and closed the door. Locked it. Leaned against it with her eyes closed and her heart pounding. On the other side, she heard nothing for a long moment. Then footsteps. Slow. Reluctant. Walking away. Imani slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. And finally, she let herself cry. Not for what they could have been. Not for the loss of possibility. But for the girl she used to be. The girl who looked at powerful men and hoped they'd save her. The girl who thought love meant grand gestures and dramatic rescues. That girl was gone now. And in her place was a woman who knew her worth. Who understood that real love was quiet and steady and showed up in the moments that mattered. A woman who could walk away from almost love because she knew she deserved the real thing. Imani sat on her apartment floor and cried until she had no tears left. And when she finally stood up, she felt lighter. Clearer. Free. Outside her door, Junho Park got into his car and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. He'd asked what he could do to fix this. She'd told him, "Let me go." And for the first time in his life, Junho Park had to accept that some things, some people, couldn't be fixed or claimed or won. Some women walked away. And the most loving thing he could do was let them. 6 months later, Imani stood in front of her new office building, a sleek glass tower in Culver City, and allowed herself a small smile. Cultural liaison for an international education nonprofit. Good salary. Better benefits. Work that actually meant something. Work where she got to use her languages, her intelligence, her ability to bridge cultures and facilitate understanding. Work where no one questioned whether she belonged. She'd cut her hair shorter. Started wearing colors she'd always loved but never had the confidence to pull off. Moved into a one-bedroom apartment with actual sunlight and a balcony where she grew herbs. Small changes. Quiet victories. But they added up to something bigger, a life that was entirely hers. Imani! She turned to see her colleague Marcus jogging toward her, coffee in hand. "You ready for the Seoul presentation?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be. Your Korean is going to blow them away. I heard the director specifically requested you for this project." Imani felt a warm glow of pride. It's a good opportunity. It's a huge opportunity. 6 months in and you're already leading international initiatives? That's incredible. It was incredible. And the best part? She'd earned it. Not through connections or favors or proximity to power. Through skill. Through work. Through being exactly who she was. "Come on," Marcus said. "Let's grab breakfast before the meeting." My treat. As they walked into the building together, Imani realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd thought about Moonlit Pearl. About Table 7. About him. Well, that wasn't entirely true. She thought about it sometimes. Late at night when she couldn't sleep. Or when she walked past Korean restaurants and caught the scent of galbi jjim. But the thoughts didn't hurt anymore. They were just memories. Parts of her story that had shaped her but no longer defined her. Across the city, Junho Park sat in his office at Moonlit Pearl and stared at his laptop screen. The email had arrived that morning. A newsletter from an education nonprofit highlighting their staff accomplishments. And there she was. Imani Brooks, cultural liaison, has been selected to lead our upcoming initiative in Seoul, South Korea, working with partner universities to develop cross-cultural exchange programs. There was a photo. Professional. Confident. She was smiling. Really smiling. Not the careful, controlled expression she'd worn at the restaurant. This was genuine. Unguarded. Happy. Junho had been tracking her. Not obsessively, not intrusively, just aware. He knew she'd gotten a new job. Knew she'd moved to a different neighborhood. Knew she was doing well. He'd kept his promise. Hadn't contacted her. Hadn't shown up. Hadn't interfered. But he'd watched from a distance, unable to completely let go of the need to know she was okay. That she was thriving. And she was. Without him. The realization sat heavy in his chest. "Sir." Junho looked up to find Min Jun in the doorway. "The quarterly reports are ready for review." "Thank you. Leave them on the desk." Min Jun hesitated. "Sir, if I may, you look tired. When's the last time you took a day off?" Junho couldn't remember. "I'm fine." "With respect, you're not." Min Jun's voice was gentle but firm. "You've been here late every night for months. You barely eat. You're running yourself into the ground. I have responsibilities. You have employees who can handle things for one day." Min Jun paused. "She wouldn't want you to do this to yourself." Junho's jaw tightened. "We don't talk about her. Maybe we should." "Min Jun." "You made a mistake," Min Jun interrupted. "Something he rarely did. A significant one. But you've learned from it. You've changed. The way you handled that incident last month, when that customer was rude to the new server, you stepped in immediately. Publicly. You protected her. Jun-ho remembered. A businessman had snapped his fingers at Maya, the server who'd replaced Imani. Had been condescending, dismissive. And Jun-ho had walked over to that table and quietly but firmly asked the man to leave. In front of everyone. It had cost him a regular customer. Probably some reputation in certain circles. But it had been the right thing to do. The thing he should have done for Imani. It was too late, Jun-ho said quietly. Being brave now doesn't change what I wasn't then. No, Min-jun agreed. But it means you're becoming the man she needed you to be. For someone else. Yes. Min-jun's expression was sympathetic. For someone else. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Jun-ho looked back at the photo of Imani. She was going to Seoul. His city. His mother's city. The place where his family's roots ran deep. She'd be there for 6 months, and he'd never know. Never see her. Never accidentally run into her at a restaurant or a market or a cultural event. Because she'd moved on. Completely. And he was still here. Still sitting in the same office. Still running the same restaurant. Still holding onto the ghost of what could have been. That evening, Jun-ho did something he hadn't done in years. He went to visit his mother. Madam Park's house in Pacific Palisades was exactly as he remembered. Elegant. Cold. Perfectly maintained. She opened the door herself. The housekeeper had the night off, and looked genuinely surprised to see him. Jun-ho. Mother. May I come in? She stepped aside, studying him with sharp eyes. You look terrible. Thank you. I mean it. When's the last time you slept properly? They moved into the sitting room. Tea was brought, though Jun-ho suspected his mother had been drinking wine before he arrived. Why are you here? She asked after a moment of silence. I need to tell you something. If this is about that girl. Her name is Imani, Jun-ho interrupted gently. And yes, it's about her. His mother's expression hardened. I thought that was finished months ago. It is finished. Jun-ho set down his teacup. She walked away. And I let her. Like she asked. Good. No, mother. Not good. He met her eyes directly. Because she was right. About everything. About me. About us. About the way we confuse power with love and control with care. Madam Park went very still. She told me once that I don't know the difference between protecting someone and possessing them, Jun-ho continued. And she was right. Because you never taught me that difference. Father never taught me. Our entire world operates on the assumption that power equals care. That's how we've survived, his mother said quietly. I know. Jun-ho's voice was gentle. And I'm not blaming you. You did what you thought was right. What your parents taught you. What their parents taught them. He paused. But it's wrong, mother. And it cost me someone who mattered. Madam Park looked at her son, really looked at him, and seemed to see something that made her expression soften slightly. You loved her. I don't know, Jun-ho admitted. I thought I did. But Imani taught me that love isn't about what you feel. It's about what you do. How you show up. Whether you choose courage over comfort. He ran a hand through his hair. And when she needed me to show up, to be brave, to stand beside her, I chose comfort. I chose silence. I chose my reputation over her dignity. You were protecting the family name. I was protecting myself, Jun-ho corrected. And she saw that. She saw right through me. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very softly, I taught you that. Yes. I taught you to prioritize family, reputation, control, to never show weakness, never be vulnerable, never let anyone see that someone, could affect you. Tears gathered in her eyes, though she didn't let them fall. I taught you wrong. Jun-ho reached across and took his mother's hand. Something he couldn't remember doing since he was a child. You taught me what you knew, he said gently. But now I need to learn something different. How? I don't know yet. He squeezed her hand. But I know I can't keep living the way I have been. Running a restaurant I don't love. Maintaining relationships that are all about obligation. Letting fear of vulnerability keep me from actually connecting with anyone. He paused. Imani walked away from me. And it was the most loving thing anyone has ever done. How is leaving you loving? Because she loved herself more, Junho said simply. She knew her worth. She refused to settle for almost love or guilt-driven gestures or a man who was trying to change but might never fully get there. He smiled sadly. She chose herself. And in doing that, she taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned. Which is that some people can't be saved. Some people can't be bought. And some people will walk away, not because they're afraid, but because they see you clearly. His mother absorbed this. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Letting her go. Every day, Junho admitted. But I also know it was the only right choice. The only respectful choice. The only choice that honored who she is and what she needed. He stood to leave. I'm thinking about selling the restaurant. His mother's eyes widened. What? I'm thinking about selling it. Traveling. Maybe going back to school. Finding out who I am when I'm not just following the path that was laid out for me. He moved toward the door. I don't know what comes next, Mother. But I know it has to be different. It has to be mine. 6 months after Imani Brooks walked out of Moonlit Pearl, Junho Park finally understood what she'd been trying to teach him. Love is not possession. Protection is not presence. Power cannot replace courage. And some women, the strongest, most beautiful, most worthy women, will walk away from men who can't see them clearly. Will walk away from almost love and guilt-driven devotion and the promise of change that comes too late. Imani was in Seoul now, building programs and bridging cultures and living a life she'd earned. And Junho was here, learning how to let go, learning how to be brave, learning how to love without possessing. Not for her. She was gone. But for whoever came next. For the man he wanted to become. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real love story all along. Not the romance that could have been. But the growth that came from losing it. The end. Thank you for watching Afro Korean Tales and Stories. If this story stayed with you, there are more waiting here. Subscribe to Afro Korean Tales and Stories for a love that crosses cultures and lingers. Tell us in the comments. What emotion are you leaving this story with?